what I think the biggest issue about this vaccine thing that they're trying to push on us. It's not selling. I mean, Bill Gates doing all the TV interviews, he's less popular than he's ever been in his whole life, even when he took that pie to the face. And so you keep seeing now governors and Democrat mayors saying, oh, no, we need this vaccine. You can't go back to work or your favorite restaurant or whatever. But there's no public support. So how are they going to roll this out? How are they going to, I mean, how do you see this going with zero public acceptance of this?
I think the premise behind all of this, at least originally or initially from Gates, was a pandemic will justify people wanting a vaccine.
And then the media fearing, the media, causing all the fear will be the kind of the opening that they use.
What's extraordinary is, I mean, even today, New York's own study documented that their shutdown approach facilitated the spread and the transmission of the disease.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, when I get off air, I like to listen to American Countdown on band.video with Robert Bob Barnes, who is in studio with me. If you're not watching that, must-see transmission at band.video. So I had to get Bob in studio today, and not just to talk about your show that's been so great and groundbreaking, but, I mean, my goodness, as a legal mind that likes to do commentary on the media, I mean, this is like the Super Bowl for you.
I mean, no doubt, especially today. I mean, you look at today, we have extraordinary developments in General Flynn finally getting vindicated by the Justice Department, admitting there never was either an investigatory basis or legal basis to pursue charges against him. Then on top of that, you have the Texas Supreme Court stepping in and freeing the Dallas salon owner from the dubious order issued by a Dallas County judge that was going to lock her up for 7 days for just running her salon. Then you have everything that's happening on the legal front in the pandemic world, where every politician is finding every creative and unique means to effectively eviscerate people's constitutional rights and liberties overnight with looser and weaker premises and pretext to do so. Today, a federal judge in Massachusetts struck down the governor there from being able to restrict people's access to guns and the right to purchase guns in their own self-defense. So it's extraordinary. And then we have the governor of Illinois coming out and saying he's not going to let churches form maybe forever. Whenever there's a vaccine, that'll be it.
No, he literally said that. In fact, I have it right here. Pritzker warns major events, conventions won't resume until improved coronavirus treatments emerge, and then says Pritzker basically is saying it has to be a vaccine. So you can't go to a Cubs game, you can't go to a bar, you can't go to church until you have your vaccine. I mean, this is beyond illegal. It's authoritarian. It's a dictatorship.
Well, it's pure tyranny at this point. I mean, in the sense of that this is the definition of what tyranny is. Someone being able to issue orders with no limits, no restrictions, no restraints, not bound by the Constitution, not bound by the legislature, not really effectively bound by the judiciary, because the judiciary in many cases is not meaningfully getting involved. So it's one case after the next, example after example after example of extraordinary malfeasance and misconduct in the prosecutorial arena. There's more evidence today about whether witnesses lied in the Roger Stone case. So it just keeps piling on. It's just extraordinary.
And it's like, I don't even know, half the time my head is spinning so much by the time I get on air at 3. I'm sure it's the same for you. I'm like dizzy, like trying to just find my balance again just to figure out what the biggest story is. But how do you, I mean, because here's what I think the biggest issue about this vaccine thing that they're trying to push on us. It's not selling. I mean, Bill Gates doing all the TV interviews, he's less popular than he's ever been in his whole life, even when he took that pie to the face. And so you keep seeing now governors and Democrat mayors saying, oh, no, we need this vaccine. You can't go back to work or your favorite restaurant or whatever. But there's no public support. So how are they going to roll this out? How are they going to, I mean, how do you see this going with zero public acceptance of this?
I think the premise behind all of this, at least originally or initially from Gates, was a pandemic will justify people wanting a vaccine.
And then the media fearing, the media, causing all the fear will be the kind of the opening that they use.
What's extraordinary is, I mean, even today, New York's own study documented that their shutdown approach facilitated the spread and the transmission of the disease. that like they did this study. The whole reason they did this study is they figured, well, we're going to show that our shutdown was really successful. That after the shutdown, the number of infections went down, that the number of infections were never that broad within the broader community. So our hospitalization rates and ICU rates and mortality rates were all initially and originally correct. And not only that, we're going to find out that the people that are in the health community, people that are essential workers, we're going to find that they have a much higher rate of infection. Anybody who is outdoors and outside a lot, they're going to have a higher rate of infection than the people who are indoors. And it turned out exactly the opposite. People who stayed indoors had a much higher rate of transmission of an infection than people who went outdoors and stayed employed and stayed involved in their social world. Now, of course, that's what every form of medical literature had said up until this point. I mean, that's why very much so that this pandemic was a political strategy, not a public health strategy. And it had multiple angles. You had Democrats who wanted to take out Trump. You had power mad politicians wanting to grab as much power as they could. And you had Bill Gates, who thought it was a perfect pretext to convince the world of the necessity of world vaccination. And I think what it is because there was so much fake news in it. So much of it was pretextual, and public's in the sort of ordinary person's instincts were that there's something wrong here. Rather than embracing vaccines, it has led them to be more skeptical. And you're seeing people remember all the vaccine problems with H1N1, all the vaccine problems with the swine flu of 1976, where they rushed a vaccine. They have frequently used the pandemic as a pretext to rush a vaccine, and almost every time it's backfired. It has not turned out popular. People have ended up dead. People have ended up with diseases from the vaccine, not from the supposed disease. And usually the rate of projection of how dangerous the disease was going to be turns out to be greatly exaggerated. Since 1976, we've had about 4 of these where they overstated SARS, they overstated hoof and foot disease, they overstated H1N1 in certain parts of the world, and they overstated, of course, the 1976 swine flu. So there's a long history of them behaving in this way that the press had done a good job of suppressing current and contemporary knowledge of. And I mean, you have a contrast. I've been explaining to people, how is it Bill Gates is obsessing, and Anthony Fauci, obsessing over pandemics, and yet our only plan when an actual pandemic hits is to hit the panic button? That doesn't, there's something wrong there. The more logical explanation is the belief was that a pandemic would be a perfect pretext to push the ideology of vaccines for as a one-size-fits-all solution as the goal and the objective.
And by the way, that story has come out now, the latest from NBC. A shocking 2/3 of patients recently hospitalized in New York had been staying home. So they were social distancing. They were already doing the whole thing, and they just got sick anyway. Because of course they did. It's a virus. It's the COVID virus. It gets around. This one is souped up, came from a lab, but most people are going to test positive for COVID. It's in your microbiome.
Well, the nature of this particular influenza kind of disease is that it almost always requires indoors transmission, so that it's most effective in closed, confined
Literally
quarters.
Can't live outside.
Exactly. Sunlight kills it very quickly. It struggles in humidity.
It's like
it struggles in open air.
There's vampires, so shelter in your home in the darkest place possible. And you're like, wait a second, vampires die in the sunlight. I should be outside. No. Stay in dark places so the vampires can't get you.
Yeah, well, it would be as if you had a vampire epidemic, they tell you to sleep during the day and only go out at night. I mean, that was the logic of what they did. And it was completely reverse and inverse of what it was supposed to be. And it's sort of Chinese authoritarianism became the true dangerous infection in America.
And by the way, the models that were just completely wrong,
yes.
We're now learning even more about these models, funded by Bill Gates at these universities, adopted by Birx and Fauci. They then bring them to Trump. And look, I mean, Trump's sitting there. He's being told, hey, 2 million are going to die. You're going to be blamed for it. This is going to be your whatever moment. And so even though he didn't believe it, he was in such a corner. I guess he felt like there was no victory at that point and didn't believe in fighting it at that instance and said, okay, I'll just let my enemy destroy myself. But now it's all come out. The models that were wrong, funded by Bill Gates, now he's pushing the vaccines. And by the way, too, and the crew went back and put these pieces together. So now it's basically totally confirmed. This spread in the United States is all out of New York. It was all out of New York. It came out of New York, and the whole quarantine stay-at-home thing didn't work. And so even the New York Times is admitting this. Travel from New York City, seeded wave of U.S. outbreaks. Well, remember, the president joked around in March saying, well, maybe we should ban travel from New York. Because remember, And Cuomo, of course, how dare he? He hates us. But remember, China suspended all domestic flights coming out of Wuhan.
Right.
That stopped the spread from getting to Shanghai and everywhere else. So, I mean, we could have done that in New York, and maybe it would have stopped the spread.
What's extraordinary about this is, I mean, travel has been the main means of spread, and it's usually been in close. And then after that, it requires interfamily transmission or other forms of close continuous contact. What they're also confirming is that more than half, increasingly up to 75 or 80% of recent cases are almost all nursing home long-term care cases. So they took people they knew had the disease, forced them into close continuous contact in confined quarters, knowing it would spread and kill people.
All right, we've got more coming up here with Robert Barnes, including what will happen to me in San Antonio tomorrow if I dare say China virus. Truly is an amazing time to be alive. And as my in-studio guest was saying, it's a Super Bowl for legal minds out there who like doing media commentary. And by the way, I will say this to put a feather in Bob's hat here. A lot of legal experts try to get involved in media and really struggle, but you've done a great job on American Countdown. Must watch, ladies and gentlemen, weeknights, band.video from 7 to 9. And so I'm just sitting here like, holy smokes, this is an incredible transmission. I got to get Bob on to at least promote it so that you guys know it's out there, but then also his legal expertise is incredible as well. So we'll talk about your transmission coming up tonight and what you plan on talking about. I'm sure it'll be Flynn and some other such situations. But let's move on to some of these other coronavirus edicts that we're seeing from now. Pritzker in Illinois, who says, okay, you cannot go to games or anything or church or anything without getting your vaccine. So what do we see? So how does this happen? Because there's obviously going to be a pushback. Mm-hmm. And I think even though at first, probably the MLB and some of these other leagues will go along with it, at least at first thinking, okay, they don't understand. These people are so out of touch with the common man. They don't understand. They don't want to do this. So they'll just figure, oh, okay, they'll take their vaccine. But then when they see no one's going to the games, no one's buying the $10 beers, how do you kind of see this going? Because I don't think the American public are going to take a vaccine to go to a ball game. Certainly not enough that they need, even though we're clearly seeing that that's going to be how they roll this out. That's going to be how they reopen these leagues and reopen big establishments and stuff like that. So, I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Because legally, they can't make you take a vaccine. Now, that may be a battle we have to fight. But, culturally, when they say you can't even engage in civilization without taking a vaccine, how do you see that going, seeing that the public response to this has been, yeah, we're not doing this?
It'll be interesting to watch. I mean, I think that this was clearly the end game, and this was at least the original intention. Gates was saying that from the get-go, saying that if anybody's going to go out, we have to have a position and a policy that they have to get a vaccine and as a means of participation in public life again. And so in that context, that while that was the agenda, I think there's so much more pushback. And I think as more people discover the risks of flu-related vaccines. I mean, for example, I was just looking at a study today where they talked about flu vaccines are somewhere between 10% and 60% successful. And I was curious how they were measuring success. And they were measuring success by the number of people who did not get the flu who got the vaccine. The problem is more than 60% of the people who do not get the vaccine do not get the seasonal flu in a given year. So in fact, it became increasingly clear that there's no evidence that the vaccines have any success against influenza.
Yeah, I was going to say the only real measurement you could do, and believe me, my least favorite part of psychology was doing data analysis, and I didn't like doing chemistry data analysis either. That's why I quit studying science and stuff. But I mean, obviously, the reasonable measurement to do is to take two groups, and you'd probably even have to have a third group with a placebo, but to have two groups and say, okay, 50 people are vaccinated, 50 people aren't. And then, but because what you're saying is you don't know if 50 people get the flu vaccine and 25 of them don't get the flu, you don't know whether they would have not gotten the flu anyway. And so Precisely. That's why you have to have the two groups of people to say, okay, here's 100 people that didn't take the vaccine, 5 of them got the flu. And here's 100 people that half took the vaccine and 10 of them got the flu.
And we have a test run of that every year in the U.S. Because every year in the U.S., a lot of people never get the flu vaccine and also never get the flu. And so when you look at the proportionate ratios, you see that there's not a lot of evidence that the flu vaccine has any meaningful impact at reducing actually preventing you from getting the flu.
Well, even doctors that help manufacture it even admit they know it doesn't work because by the time it reaches market, the vaccine, the flu virus has already
mutated.
Yeah.
Exactly. And once you understand that, then you understand, and they're talking about how this mutates, COVID-19 mutates. And that doesn't necessarily make it more deadly. As a general rule, influenza-like viruses want to survive, and the way they survive, not that they have a consciousness, but just they have a biological need to survive, the best way to biologically survive is to become less deadly, more contagious, less deadly. The less deadly they are, the more effect they can survive. The virus itself can survive for a longer time period. That's all. Generally, the higher the infection rate, the lower the mortality rate. And that is, in fact, what we're finding.
You don't want to kill your host.
Exactly, because that kills you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why most viruses generally you don't have to worry. What was amazing here was the media's ability to push this propaganda point of saying, oh my goodness, look at how infectious it is, while pretending that the mortality rate would somehow stay flat or constant rather than going down. As one goes up, the other goes down almost throughout the entire history of most viruses, particularly influenza-like type.
But the way they have it, the curve is never going to go down because cases are always going to go up. There is no curve.
It's like if you were cross-examining it, you could take apart almost everything the press did, both in terms of their public logic and in terms of their visual graphics and narrative structuring, because they were doing things like the relevant graph would have been the growth rate of death of the virus. If you look at that graph, that started out exponentially high, then it starts to flatline like an S-curve, and it's been going down now for weeks. I mean, we're at a death growth rate of about 2% in the United States, 3%.
This is mostly just because of testing.
Exactly, and this was supposed to be something that grew at 35 to 40% every day. That's how it started out. Now it's way below that, which means, in fact, it's generally proportionate to testing. The reality is a bunch of people had some form of COVID-19. It's somewhere between 10 and 25%, depending on the local community. Some cases as low as 2 to 4% if it was never impacted. But in any instance, it was 10 to 25 times the ratio of the actual known cases. And in fact, this was, all the way back when they were doing the flu testing, they were comparing people who had confirmed flu test case to people who, they were using confirmed COVID-19 tests to people they were estimating had the flu. That's how they created this whole bogus narrative that this was 30 times more deadly.
Well, and then the financial incentive was out there for the hospitals and everybody to report it.
They kept adding on to it. And not only that, they created a set of policies that was going to guarantee to kill more people by locking them into their homes, locking them into nursing homes. They guaranteed the death rate would be higher.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that because I forgot about that. Cuomo literally sent infected people to nursing homes.
And in fact, it's turning out that may have been the case in New Jersey as well. That may have been the case in California. That may be the case in Pennsylvania.
These people are sitting here, acting like Trump deserves the death penalty for this. If I'm not saying anybody does, but apply that logic to the response from Cuomo and New Jersey if you're going to be looking at anybody. But I want to give you a big tip of the cap here in the last minute here because you've done what I think a lot of Trump supporters or conservatives or moreover patriots have wanted to do, and that's you've faced off against the quote-unquote conservative social distancing maskers who I can't stand from the beginning. I don't really like doing infighting, and I like to maintain an even keel with these people. I don't think they're my enemy. I just think they're a little less courageous. I'll just say that. But you've been spoken against them, all the Trump-supporting patriots, so-called brave and free, who want to wear a mask, want to support the social distancing. They came after you hard. You've been proven entirely right in time. Yeah. Have they admitted that? Have they apologized for their attacks on you?
Well, I consider, though this person didn't attack me, I consider it a conversion when Mike Cernovich started to flip over from being a sort of a pandemic.
Well, there's one thing to admit that, okay, I was wrong, I'm going to adjust.
Exactly.
That's fair. There's another thing to just say, no, you're going to cause people to die.
Exactly. Well, now even Scott Adams says he's against the lockdown, so that was a great. So my goal was persuasion, so I persuaded the reasonable people over, and the people that are still crazy are still crazy. That's the nature of TDS. It's the infection that never goes away.
Bob Barnes is like it's like one of those pendulums you just hypnotize. You're like,
exactly.
This is not the deadly pandemic you think it is. This is not the coronavirus you think it is. This is a Chinese virus, and you will survive it.
Hey, you there. The battle for the Republic is on. The American Revolution 2.0 is happening right now. But the corrupt establishment doesn't want you to know, and they certainly don't want you to get involved. But you can at band.video. The truth lives at band.video. The information they don't want you to see is at band.video. This is your destiny. This is the epic battle for the future of humanity. America will survive as long as you fight. I've got to go.
The superpower that I have is that I tell you what I really think, even if it ends up hurting me short term. I believe in God, and I believe in the long run, it'll end up being better for myself and everybody else in this world we live together in. I understand what comes around, goes around, you reap what you sow, and I live that. And I fundamentally, at a cellular level, understand it. Now, if I would have hyped up the virus was going to kill 3, 4, 5 million people like the UN did, I would have sold 5 times more supplements. But you know what? I didn't do that. But I said on a routine basis, regardless, people are vitamin D deficient, people are deficient in iodine and so many other issues. You need those products regardless. So when we started selling out of Vitamin Mineral Fusion, all the other products, I cut the prices from 30% off to 60% off because I knew it was the right thing to do during a crisis to make sure people were incentivized to up their body's defenses. But now I'm telling you, with the economic crises going on, get your storable food now.